Welcome to this week's Marketing Monday, where I cover business and finance. Now, about a year ago, you might remember when Nvidia stock ended up becoming worth more than Apple's, and it seems like no matter what news comes out about Nvidia, the stock just continues to rise. And it seems like the stock is just invincible. But I think this more recent news is the most ridiculous market reaction yet when it comes to AI companies. And that's because OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, made a $300 billion deal with Oracle to host ChatGPT on cloud servers for the next 5 years. Now, I know with AI companies, billions of dollars is being thrown around left and right, so I really want to give you some perspective on how much money this really is. Now, one of the co-founders of Oracle, Larry Ellison, owns 40% stock of the company, and after this recent news and the stock shot up, he gained $100 billion in net worth, and this made him the second richest man in the world. He is now richer than Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, and it's not by a little bit, it's by a lot. And what also makes this crazy is the fact that OpenAI went to Oracle for cloud servers. You might not know this, but OpenAI is mainly controlled by Microsoft, and OpenAI already uses Microsoft servers. And the reason why they're actually going to Oracle is because they maxed out Microsoft servers and they need more. Now, if you never heard of the company Oracle, I wouldn't blame you. But if it sounds familiar, it might be because you've downloaded Java before or VirtualBox, as they distribute both programs. But their main business model is business to business, where they offer cloud servers to small to mid-sized businesses. So it seems odd that OpenAI would go with Oracle when they're not the best option out there, but it makes more sense when you realize that the only other real option is Google. And Google is a main competitor to ChatGPT, as they have Google Gemini. And a few months back, Oracle actually bought Nvidia chips for their cloud servers. So Oracle does have the hardware for this deal. But what really makes this deal crazy is how OpenAI is going to pay $300 billion. Just so you know, ChatGPT only makes $12 billion in revenue every year, and it loses money on that. Also keep in mind that OpenAI raised $60 billion, which is only enough to cover for 1 year. Now, it wouldn't make sense if Microsoft would be the ones to fund OpenAI for this deal, except I want to put in perspective how much money this really is for Microsoft. If you were to add up the top 10 most expensive acquisitions for Microsoft combined, it would be $160 billion, which is a little over half of how much OpenAI has to pay for this deal to Oracle. Microsoft also said that it plans to spend $120 billion on AI next year. If we assume that Microsoft will spend that same amount of money for the next 5 years, that would be $600 billion. Half of that would be just for this deal to Oracle, just to host ChatGPT on cloud servers. And also, 5 years seems like a very long time for OpenAI to have this deal when Microsoft's eventually going to have servers available for ChatGPT. So with all that knowledge, it seems like it's pretty much impossible for OpenAI to find $300 billion for this deal. Aren't you at least supposed to negotiate during a deal? Couldn't Sam Altman be like, hey, let's slash it in half to $150 billion? Or maybe cut it down by a third and say, hey, let's pay $200 billion. He couldn't negotiate at all? This is so much money. It seems like he just didn't negotiate at all. And he's like, oh, $300 billion? Sure, yeah, I agree. And this isn't the only thing OpenAI is working on. They already spent $6.5 billion to buy I.O. Productions, which is working on a new device that's supposed to rival Apple. Although it's not even out yet, so we don't even know what it is. And just so you know, this deal is one of the largest cloud contracts ever signed. And so when I see all this money being thrown around, I keep wondering, when is this going to stop? When are people finally going to stop spending so much money on AI? At least at the end of this, Nvidia already made billions of dollars. So even if the money dries up, they've already made money. But OpenAI is just burning through money. Microsoft is burning through money. Google's burning through money. How long are they going to do this for? And let's say theoretically, AI still keeps growing and the hype doesn't die down. Eventually, Nvidia is going to reach a limit on how many AI chips they can produce. So even if Nvidia really is going to produce all these AI chips, they physically can't. They're going to max out on the amount of chips that Taiwan can produce. And after seeing all this, I've come to the conclusion that none of this really matters. Usually the theory of the stock market is if it's overvalued or undervalued, eventually the stock market will correct itself. And it seems like that's no longer the case. Even when you look at Nvidia recently, when it seemed like sales were slowing down, As soon as the stock started dipping, people bought the dip. And let's say, even if you do know that it doesn't make sense to buy Tesla or Nvidia or Oracle, if you don't buy those stocks, you miss out on all this money because so many people are buying to these stocks. And after thinking about it, I came to the conclusion that the reason why all this hype's happening the way it is actually because of crypto. Because with crypto, there's no reason to buy a crypto coin at all. Yet people bought it. And the whole point of buying it is to try and buy it at a low price, sell high. And the whole point of actual value is erased. So when it comes to actual stocks, which is the whole value is the dividends, people aren't buying it for the dividends. They're buying it for the same reason they buy cryptocurrency, because they want to buy low and sell high. It seems like the people who actually buy this for the profits are long gone. And similar to cryptocurrencies, where you have people make a post about it and everyone buys and buys and buys, same thing happens with AI companies, such as Opendoor, which is basically Carvana for houses. Once you had a guy on Twitter who had some credibility because he correctly predicted that Carvana stock would rise, as it massively did, all of a sudden he got a cult following, and just like a cryptocurrency, people started buying Opendoor so much, where the stock went from being threatened to be taken off the NASDAQ to now being worth, And even looking at Oracle stock, as people already have doubts and are selling, I wouldn't be surprised if we see retail investors buy the dip, because it doesn't even matter anymore. And that's why I find it so crazy that because of all this, Larry Ellison is now the second richest man in the world, who you probably never heard of before. Although, Larry Ellison gives most of his money to his kids, and they actually are prevalent in recent news too. Now, Larry Ellison has 2 kids, but the one I want to focus on is David Ellison. You might know him because he bought Paramount for $8 billion. But that's not the only thing he spent money on. He spent $7.7 billion to buy exclusive rights to the UFC for the next 7 years, which outbid Netflix. He's also responsible for the $1 billion deal that Paramount made with South Park. And now recently he's planning on buying Warner Brothers. Now, part of why I find this concerning is because Paramount owns CBS, and Warner Brothers owns CNN. So if he buys this, that would be 2 media studios merging together. Although the more I looked into this, the more I'm not sure if this is entirely a bad thing. After all, the Hollywood industry is already struggling, especially because there's so many remakes being made. And after looking to David Ellison, it seems like he might actually shake up Hollywood and make some interesting movies. Now, I'm going to list some of the movies he made with his movie studio, Skydance Media, just so you could see what kind of movies he's made on his own. With the help of Paramount Pictures before he bought them out, he made Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, Star Trek Into Darkness, World War Z, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. He also made Star Trek Beyond, and he also made the remake of Top Gun Maverick. Now, it seems like Ellison might actually be willing to take some creative risks. After all, when Paramount bought South Park, he's actually letting them do whatever they want and have complete control to make whatever they want. And the other reason why I think David Ellison might actually be a bit more creative is because of his sister, Megan Ellison. His sister started a company, Annapurna Productions. At first it focused on making movies. Now, I didn't recognize a lot of them as they're indie movies, and the way she does it is she'll meet with the person directly, and if she likes the idea, she'll just fund the movie. But recently she's been focusing more on publishing games, and you might recognize some of these such as Outer Wilds, Journey, 12 Minutes, and Stray. And these are all games that she's published. And after I saw this, I looked into his dad a bit more to see what he thought about his kids, and I found out that he just wants his kids to spend money. He said, "The sooner my kids get experience dealing with the pluses and minuses of having a lot of money, the better." He then said that it's like taking a drink. He prefers children to learn to drink at home rather than to discover alcohol for the first time when they pass some arbitrary age qualification. And then I also found this. David, then 13, already had his own plane. Someone asked Ellison if he planned to motivate his son to do anything besides fly planes and play video games, and his response was maybe he doesn't get challenged to make money, but he would still need to figure out what makes him happy. And then he said maybe he spends his life giving away money rather than making it. That's not a bad thing. So after seeing all that, I became a bit convinced that David might not be entirely focused on making money. And I don't even know if he cares about making it at all. After all, his dad is now the second richest man in the world. And this is actually a stark contrast to some of the other richest people in the world. Bill Gates only gave his kids $10 million, and Elon Musk just ignores his kids. And I don't know if this deal is going to go through, but something to keep in mind is that Warner Bros. Is $30 billion in debt, so they do need to get saved at some point. Although with all that debt, if he does buy Warner Brothers, he's gonna have to make enough money to pay off that debt. If you look at budget companies like Spirit Airlines, for example, they're in $2 billion in debt and actually declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy because people aren't flying Spirit anymore. Now, this actually isn't the first time that Spirit Airlines declared bankruptcy. A little while ago, they declared bankruptcy when they had $800 million in debt. Now, when Spirit originally declared bankruptcy, they originally wanted to merge with JetBlue Airlines, but it was blocked because the judge was worried that if they merged, customers would lose out on a cheaper airline. But now that the company has $2 billion in debt, it seems like a cheaper airline isn't what people want. And especially now that companies like United are now seeing that customers are willing to pay more for better seats. Before, when planes had better seats, it used to actually be a loss leader, and it was there just to give bonuses to people that flew a lot. But after 2020, when prices went down, airlines soon found out that people are willing to pay a little more for better seats, even long after 2020. Now, part of this is also because there's a trend where Americans are now flying outside the United States instead of within the country. That is one of the reasons why two companies, Delta and United, accounted for almost 85% of the US airline industry's profits for the first 9 months of the year. And part of the reason why they're making so much money is because United and Delta are offering a bit cheaper seats. And there's actually a trend where flights are starting to add more seats to have more legroom. And I wouldn't be surprised that if this trend keeps going, all airlines will just have more legroom as a whole. And pretty much if you want to fly a plane, you'll just have to spend more for the more legroom. Although, the other reason why Spirit's struggling is because of those bigger companies. The truth is that flight is becoming more expensive, and companies like United and Delta are actually buying up the pilots from Spirit. That's why Spirit is burning through money fast. Spirit disclosed the projections showing that it expects to burn $179 million for the first month of the bankruptcy case. Now what's funny is they told the bankruptcy court that this time will be different. So if any of you ever fly Spirit for a cheaper airline, it seems like they won't last much longer. They've already had to cut prices to try and get people to go on their flights, but people just aren't going, so they had to cut flights and sell planes. Now, part of the reason why I'm shocked people aren't flying Spirit anymore is because the economy isn't doing great. Companies including Homedale Foods, J.M. Smuckers, and Ace Hardware have said they are all raising prices for reasons ranging from higher meat costs to tariffs. At larger retailers like Walmart, Target, and Best Buy, some tariff-related price increases are already in place and more on the way. And this is actually a really big problem because the more prices go up and the less people spend money, the less money that's going to be there for jobs. And there was already a report that there are 911,000 less jobs compared to last year. And also, the number of Americans who filed for initial unemployment benefits jumped last week, hitting the highest level since October 2021. In this week through September 6, jobless claim filing rose to 263,000. Now this puts the Fed in a really bad spot because they already said they're going to cut rates, which is going to help the job market, but it's going to make inflation worse. But with the way things are going, it seems like inflation is just going to be ignored. So it seems like it's going to be really bad. It also makes me wonder that if inflation will go up and people spend less, will the rate cuts even help the job market at all if people just won't spend money? Even stuff like tools from the EU now have high tariffs too. About 30% of US machinery imports from the EU are now subject to 50% tariff on the metal contents of the product. Now originally this only applied to the metal itself, which included like screws, nails and stuff. But that recently changed to include every product that contains metal will have a 50% tariff. So after this happened, EU companies just stopped exporting to the United States altogether because it just wasn't worth it. So then this was changed where it'll be a percentage of the metal used in the product you're buying. So for a machine worth $100 million with a 20% steel content, the rate would be 50% for $200,000 and 15% for the rest, resulting in a $220,000 levy per machine, or a 22% tariff. The US has said it would review the metals tariff list every 4 months, adding to the uncertainty. And the reality is, with all these price increases, people are going to just spend less. And call me crazy, but I don't think it's a good sign if people are spending less on drills or tractors. And on top of this, Trump's trying to put pressure on the EU. President Trump asked the European Union to hit some Chinese and Indian goods with tariffs up to 100% in a new attempt to ratchet up pressure on Russia over its war in Ukraine, 2 EU officials said. Although with all these tariffs on Europe already, it makes sense that Europe doesn't really want to listen to the United States anymore. Although the EU has already said that they're going to put sanctions on Russia anyway because they don't do tariffs on Russia. And it also doesn't help that after the EU fined Google $3.5 billion for being a monopoly, that Trump is now threatening tariffs if the government does not reverse its decision. I don't think the EU will take too kindly for Trump trying to control the EU and be a president for the EU as well. So it seems like anything that's foreign is going to be really difficult to buy anytime soon, especially from Europe. Now you might notice I did miss some recent gaming news with Nintendo's Direct, and I'm actually going to cover that next week. So that's all I have for this week. Thank you so much for watching.